Good morning, folks, or evening, or afternoon, or wherever it might be.
Hi, everyone.
And good evening. I know for Martina it's evening, so welcome.
Happy midday from the East Coast.
Yeah, midday. That's a good yes. We hit all times. Just reminding everyone that we do have a an APAC meeting that takes place. What is it? 10 hours. No, let's see, 10 hours from now. So it's at 6 p.m. Pacific for anyone. It often ends up being Sakershan and I and one or two guests, but we have some nice deep. Grace is here. Great. Um, I I'm not sure what continent she's on right now. Uh, World traveler that she is. All right, let's give it a minute for the room to fill up here, and I will share my screen. All right, great stuff. Uh, this here and that there. And all arranging of windows here. Let's give it one more minute for people to come in. There we go. Yeah. I have a good crowd today, which is great because it's a big week here because next week we are going to be at two events we'll talk about in just a minute. So lots of prep going on. All right, I'm showing it's 3 minutes past the hour. So let's go ahead and get going. Welcome everyone to the February 18th meeting of the Decentralized Trust Graph Working Group. And as always, we will share our antitrust policy notice as the first thing we do. As a working group of Trust RVP, which is under Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust, we all abide by that policy. All right, quickly. Oh, I see Joe just came on. Welcome, Joe. Um, we'll always check to see if there are any new members that would like to give an introduction. You're welcome to do that. I also will put on a link here to our bio page. You're welcome to anyone has right access to that. Put in a note about your bio so you can see about the background of other folks that are active in this working group. And you can also just put something in the chat. Is there anyone who would like to do an introduction today? Just raise your hand and you can quickly do that. So always checking here. All right, no problem. Okay, so as always, we have a packed agenda. A quick summary. We're going to have Nikki's. We're going to report out on the Risk Assessment Harms Prevention Task Force. She and Sankarsh have been doing work on. Then we have basically three things coming from the Credentials Task Force report on various progress on various things and preparation for the Linux Foundation Member Summit next week. And then lastly, we have the agent names proposal. And if you haven't heard of agent names before, don't be surprised because it's a new concept that we've anticipated and included in the charter for this working group, and we will tell you about it. So before we go any further, are there any additions or revisions to the agenda? Always check on that, see if there's anything else folks want to bring up. Okay, then quickly announcements. Since I this is the last week before they actually happen. A reminder that next Monday is the H2H Summit on Human Agency, which is still open. It's a invitation based, but any member of this working group is happily invited. Put that link in the chat. That's taking place at the Silverado report. Excuse me, Silverado Resort in Napa, California, the same location as the Linux Foundation Member Summit. The next 2 days, which we'll talk about later. And Riza, you've got the Why Summit. I made sure to copy that over as well. Coming up in Pasadena, March 5th. Any update or new news about that one? I think you have another.
Yeah, Bruce Schneier, late edition. He saw the caliber of speakers. He said, if Drummond Reed's going to be speaking, I need to be there. But he's going to be dialing in. He won't be there in person. I posted the agenda. So the Quai Summit is co-located within a bigger summit. It's the Southern California Linux Expo. In its 23rd year, we programmed the AI track, but you need to get a ticket for that. Now, if you go through this website, this web page that I posted here, you can find the Quai discount code. That'll give you 50% off the scale, as it's called, Southern California Linux Expo conference. Look, it's so inexpensive. You're going to spend more on parking than you are on the conference fee. So it's going to be well worth it. Look at the lineup of speakers. In addition to Drummond Reed, we've got Ben Goertzel, the guy who coined the phrase AGI. We've got our own Daniel Barbosa from the Linux Foundation, General Manager. Thank you so much, Drummond, for asking her to moderate the panel. We've also got, we had Doc Searles, but he dropped out. So we've got Richard Witt in his stead, filling the big shoes of Doc Searles, and we'll be reporting on our research and development efforts over the last year. Lots to cover.
Excellent. And Martina, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Reza, for the information. I just wanted to mention that Mitchell raised something that he would like to add to the agenda. I'm not sure whether you saw that in the chat.
Oh, I just saw that, Mitchell. You're an expression of a trust graph formation you're working on.
Yes.
Good. I tell you what, let's. I will add
Possible.
that. If I think it will be fairly efficient. I will add that right down here to
Cool.
Mitchell.
I think just like 5 minutes or so. It's just to give like slight context. It's for an event, like a standards event around blockchain governance that I'll be co-chairing in a couple of weeks, and I've built a equivalent to a governance malt book agentic experience for us, and it combines, or it tries to procreate 3 graphs: a knowledge graph, which is the substrate, the information in the conference; a promise graph, which is the intents, and hopefully that expression is through my terms; and then the emergent property is the trust graph, which all things equal, hopefully we can enshrine with VRCs and personhood credentials.
Very cool. All right, we will try and make sure to get that, and feel free to also, if you have a link posted in the chat, if folks want to look at that. Good, because there's a reason to go even faster today. All right, any other announcements before we dive into the agenda? If not, well, I'm going to turn it over to you, Nikki, and let me know if you want to share anything. Or just
No, I'll just talk through the notes if that's okay.
Go for
it. So unfortunately, Scott's had to focus in on his client work. So he's taken a step back from the task force. And so Sankshan and Kevin and Martina and myself met yesterday, and firstly, we're going to revise the time and cadence of the meetings to be bi-weekly, starting the week after next. And secondly, we're going to move it half an hour into the day for West Coast folks, hoping that it'll be a bit easier for those guys to join, or but still not mean that the APAC and so forth folks are staying up too late. And then secondly, obviously we've met for a little sporadically, but we've met over the last few months, and we we need to be useful to the group. And so Sankarshan has proposed a new approach, and we all discussed it and agreed on it. And so we want to change the deliverables from the original task force deliverables, which were this risk assessment Excel spreadsheet, essentially, which is very comprehensive, goes right across the whole of the decentralized trust graph working group kind of remit and scope, which is still a little fluid. So we want to put that one on hold and take what we've learned so far, drawing in insights from analysis that has been done by various people, including Sankarshan, particularly John Phillips, obviously Scott, myself, Martina, and bring that together in a short guidance document. And we're going to make use of things like the harms paper we did a few years ago with its checklist of stuff to be doing, and like practical steps. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to produce that by the end of March for internal review. So in that we'll include the guidance, and we'll include some persona and some scenarios to kind of ground the more technical work in human experience. And we'll include this checklist. And so the question to the group is, what else could be useful to you guys as a tool to ensure that there's a kind of risk awareness and harms prevention mindset coming into the specifications?
Oh, that's a
Kind
great
of an
question.
open question.
So I'll give one answer. I've been thinking hard. You'll see a theme emerging constantly, as did at the first person workshop we had last month, that what we're building, the sort of core concept ends up being the verifiable trust community, right? And how you build it and maintain it, and how it cross connects. And so I've been thinking the next paper at the first person project that we want to do is really an explanation of what is a verifiable trust community, and how does it work? Why will it be an important evolutionary step in online infrastructure and life? So I've been thinking that that's a perfect frame within that to say, oh, okay, what are the risks and harms, right? What can go wrong? And how do we address that? And so I'm just sharing that I would love, as we put that together, and I'd love to have it be an output of the of the working group, to have a whole part of that where we address that. That feels like it'll be a highly relevant piece of that. So that's just one thought. And any other thoughts that folks want to share? Go ahead, Riza. You're on mute.
Mute, and I'm talking eloquently to a muted microphone. We typically traditionally in security models, we create the sort of Bob, Alice, Eve model, and maybe throw in an extra role of Mallory, who's the bad actor as well. But it's it's these have been done, so there are many examples of those models, and it helps you understand the roles of each of the actors in there. Who's the relying party? Who's trying to protect data? Maybe they all are trying to protect data, and then figure out. Let's say if Bob is trying to communicate with Alice, but Eve is in there and she's eavesdropping. So her role is to eavesdrop and try and glean what is in the secure communication. We there are numerous examples of these sorts of models. I'd love to see one for the trust graph communities that we're talking about, and just do that role playing and figuring out how each of these actors can get what they want or not. Yeah.
Well, this is really music to my ears because I'm a big fan of keeping the customer in the room and starting with people. And we know we're designing a socio-technical system, and therefore we need to factor in those social things. Um, I've got a process that starts with uh, the diagram that we talked about before with the different actors in the decentralized trust graph ecosystem, and then sourcing data to inform the personas, and then a structure that is the usual stuff around pain points and needs and so forth. But it would be great if anyone's got like persona in the bag that they've been working with and are comfortable with, and then I'll synthesize it. And what I can say is that we use this process in Sovereign to help us write white papers and to really ground those papers in human experience. So every time we talked about a fancy new guardianship credential, we related it back to our persona. And actually, even the IoT working group used persona, including Bessie the cow, in order to explain what they were trying to explain about IoT. So it's a storytelling device as well as a design device. And actually, many of the sovereign persona were then used in COVID credentials. I use an inclusive design approach. So we'll have a couple of edge case or extreme users, someone who's maybe an immigrant, so they've got no obvious root of trust in a new context. And the reason for that is if you design with extreme users in mind, then you get better products that have more real world applicability. And then the scenarios are just situations that you put those persona in.
Love it. Love it. I think that's going to be
So it
fantastic.
sounds like that will be handy for folks. So I don't want to take up all this time in the meeting, and we're going to take a different approach. So we're going to do this guidance note and little tool set, and then we're going to spend time in the trust at the task force sessions discussing the things in GitHub and documenting it in GitHub discussions. And we're going to focus on the VRC spec initially so that we're not trying to cover everything everywhere all of the time, all at once. We're we want to actively contribute to the work of the rest of the group rather than being a little side shoot that comes in at the end and says, I'm sorry, you can't do that because,
Right.
So that's the aim. Anything to add, Martina or Sankarshan?
No, I think you framed it very, very well, explained it perfectly. I just also want to maybe to add that it's not just about, let's say, a more accurate, absolutely, but technical perspective with Alice and Bob, but more really also about like the real life personal experiences that those personas built upon. That's all
Right.
from my
That
side.
sounds good. We got three hands up. So, Mitch, you're first.
I'll be quick. We have two sessions at this coming up. One is on the common harms and trying to build a taxonomy around that for blockchain-based incidents. So like the hacks and those sorts of things. And then the follow-on is like a cyber incident response framework for that. So I'd like to just make a knowledge contribution to this work in the form of the blockchain incident response and harms communication layer.
That would
And
be
yeah,
wonderful.
like I think that's a persona, right? And um, yeah, we're trying to also, which I think is relevant here, trying to discuss the way that these incidents and the analysis of it is communicated in a like publicly discoverable way, but without allowing the um, nefarious actors to be able to reconstruct that. So I think that also could be a fun discovery for us to explore.
Can I?
So,
I just
go ahead.
I'm exploring something at the moment, which is to use Claude agents as persona. And
Ooh.
would it, if I set up it, so, like a script for you to create your own persona agents that you could ask questions of, and it had the data behind it and the persona behind it, and I might do some other context engineering on relationships. Do you think that would be helpful? So you could literally ask them. You could ask Alice or ask Bob.
I think you're gonna enjoy my little demo at the end of the call today.
Oh, cool. Okay. So personas work for
Fantastic.
everyone. That's cool.
Yeah, that sounds great. The idea of personas making them, real actors you can simulate, I love that. All right, we still have two hands up. Christian, you're next.
I'll try to be quick as well. I was in the DIF, what is it, Travel and Hospitality and Travel working group yesterday. They are self-admittedly not very technical, and they were not, and they were not familiar with decentralized trust graphs. So we talked a little bit because we have a scenario that really applies, and I took the action item of documenting it over there. And I think it's a scenario we could use here, and it involves AI agents. I'm glad we have people in the group as well that have like that experience. But in the travel space, AI travel agent that knows the preferences of a traveler, flights are delayed, people down the stream need to be notified, and that gets coordinated again with levels of privacy. So I will be creating a sort of an entity diagram and various visual representation of that scenario for presentation in a week or two at some other work group. But as I create that, it becomes sort of an ideal scenario for us. They don't have the technical knowledge we have in this group, and so if we build this out a little bit for them with our experience, I would be happy to bring that back to them, and perhaps we can help bridge not gaps, but bridge knowledge between work groups out at the DIF and this one here. Anyway, putting it up there, I will share this diagram one way or another with this group here so you guys can look at it anyway. Thank you.
That sounds very cool. Yeah, I love that. Every persona that actually has, real value and is being looked at someplace would be great. Grace, go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of personas, like as you're speaking about the trust graph, because we're talking about trust, and then you were mentioning these groups. I can't remember exactly what you were calling them, but the trust groups. I think one of the personas is bot army. Like, how difficult would it be for a bot army to form its own group of supposed people and start giving each other verifiable, like credentials that say that they actually met each other and they're actually a person. And I think that's a really important and critical case because I think the trust graph is a really great implementation for a probability of personhood. But if enough bots got together who know each other, they might be able to pretend to be a trusted group. And so I think bot army is a really important persona to think about in this context.
Totally love that. That is like the number one attack vector that we've been worried about from the outset. And so actually modeling it as a persona, as a threat persona, I love that. I think that's really, really good. I'm going to remind folks that this is as we get meatier and meatier in terms of what we're building, it gets more and more interesting and useful to have this perspective of threats and harms. So with that slight adjustment in time, I'm going to try and make that meeting more often on Tuesdays, and very welcome to have other folks come into it too. That would be fantastic. All right, Nikki, anything else you want to cover, or should we get on to the next?
No, get on to the next thing. I'll set up a discussion in GitHub on persona. And so rather than a GDoc, if that works for everyone.
Please, anytime we can use, GitHub most
Okay.
productive. I'm trying to only use GDocs when, when it's something like a highly interconnected glossary where, it's more efficient that way. But that would be great. That'd be fantastic. I love, Will Craig just caught up on he called it automated astroturfing. It's like, okay. And it's absolutely, you think now with tools like, Claude and the whole Notebook thing, it's a very, very real thing. And the thing I like about it, it also makes it clear why we're doing what we're doing, right? It just those kinds of attacks we have to have defenses for. Okay, well, let's pile on. We have plenty more to cover here, and we want to get to Mitch's demo here at the end. So I will quickly cover, Jeff, the first couple topics here, and then Jeff has a table he's been working on that wants to share. So first of all, we had an action item since we're the credentials specification is the first working draft we want to get going. We had a meeting last week with Jory Burson, the head of VP of Standards for Linux Foundation, on the template. She really liked the idea. Yes, we should have one, get it standardized, have it in spec up T, and then we start using that for all of our specs. And she gave us all the guidance that we needed. Now we just have to prepare that. There are some of us that are busy getting ready for the two events I'll talk about next. So I don't think I'll be able to put time into that until the week after. But anyone else who's interested in that, we've got a few folks that have put up their hands besides Martina and I to help with that. John Phillips, who's not active on this edition, it's come to our APAC edition, also wants to help with that template. So as soon as we have that done, we can use it for any of our specs. Okay, the second one was just to let folks know. So the two events next week, the Summit on Human Agency is Monday, and then Tuesday and Wednesday is the Linux Foundation Member Summit. I would say, generally trust ORP, but the two sessions, we propose 4 sessions. It's, they do an RFP for sessions. 2 of our 4 sessions were accepted. And they both happen to be, on our topic of decentralized trust graph. So I just copied in the headlines from both of those sessions. First one's going to be, a direct demonstration of the code being developed. It's currently been called Linux Foundation Maintainer Verification Project, LKMV. And Jeff has been managing that. Thank you, Jeff, for like 9 months now. Made fantastic progress, and the code has been constantly updated to stay current with what we're doing. And one of the cool things is after the Seattle first person workshop that we had, the contributors said, it really makes sense if LF's going to rely on this, we should formally submit this to LFDT as a open source project. And I talked with Danielle and Hart, and they love that idea, and we just had to give it a name that is trademarkable. So we proposed to call it Open VTC. And we actually completed that whole process of getting it submitted yesterday, so it's in review, and hopefully, if the review goes quickly, we can announce that next week. So that'll be a key part of this session, which is both these sessions are on the last afternoon. The second one is exactly what, it's decentralized trust for the Internet of Agents. And all of us except Tricia that are active in this working group, it's just basically to explain why do we need the work that we're doing here to decentralize trust graph for to have the Internet of Humans and the Internet of Agents work together. So just giving folks a heads up, those sessions are all recorded, and I think they all go into the Linux Foundation YouTube channel, so they'll be available afterwards. Okay, and then lastly, there's going to be a special workshop. It's not on the schedule. It's on the second day, noon to 2 on the second day, just on the Linux Foundation kernel project and OpenVTC. And that's where we're meeting with kernel project folks, the Linux Foundation execs, including Jim Zemlin, and folks from LFX, their platform, to talk about, actually integrating verifiable trust communities into the Linux workflow over time. This is not going to happen overnight, but getting that whole plan going on that. And Jeff, you have, I'm going to stop sharing because you created a table, since they currently, projects like like Linux kernel, use the Web of Trust model, classic PGP Web of Trust. They call it the GPG Web of Trust, the current instance. And what we're doing is replacing that with a verifiable trust community. So Jeff, do you want to show your these comparison
Sure.
tables? Go ahead.
Yeah, real quickly, just because we're pressed for time. I put this together mainly because it's speaking to some of the kernel devs about the project. I think there's a communication needed about what are the advantages of DTG VTCs versus the traditional PGP Web of Trust that they've been using up until now. And so I basically went into some detail on that in this table. So you're looking at things like scalability, complementarity of models, use cases, and then breaking things down into sections like governance, private key management, identity management, and attestations. So this is pretty detailed, and I think just summarizing it into a couple of slides, which is what I've done here, so that Drummond can use this during the workshop. It really comes down to, I think the two main points about the difference here are identity continuity and typed credentials. So, with PGP, you're sort of tying it to your identity to a key or the fingerprint that's generated by it, whereas with DIDs, where we have persistent URIs that can survive things like key rotation and revocation. So that's a big win, I think, versus the traditional Web of Trust. And I think the most important one really to highlight is typed credentials. With PGP signatures, somebody signing a PGP key is basically saying, yeah, I vouch for this key, or, I think, Jeff at Jeff's email is really this guy called Jeff, and, by signing that key sort of proves that. With DTG, or with the decentralized trust graph credentials, we can do a more schema-driven approach to creating claims. So we have typed credentials that can say, this is a valid relationship between two entities or an endorsement or a membership credential. This is all much cleaner. And because it's typed credentials, it can be interpreted by software quite easily. So you can do a lot, making it machine readable and do quite a bit there. So um, the links in the notes for today, so I don't want to take up too much more time talking about, but I just wanted to highlight this is sort of education slash communication part, talking to the open source developers, getting them to understand why this is a step change to what they've been doing up until now. So feel free to poke through the document. If you have any specific comments or questions, you can just feel free to comment directly in the document, and then I'll reply and improve if there's things that we should add in. So, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Fantastic. They are in the dialogue that we've been having with Greg Pro-Hartman, who's number two to Linus, and Constantine, who maintains the current GPG Web of Trust. We were surprised to find that DIDs and VCs were pretty new concepts to them, and they needed education on them. The more that they understood really what their benefits were, they were like, oh, okay, this really makes sense. But we realized this kind of education is going to need to be necessary. The last call we had with them last week, they were like, okay, now we have to get 65 Linux kernel maintainers to understand that same thing, right? They've been using the GPG Web of Trust for years, and we're proposing something new. So I'm just telling everyone there's education going on here. That we might be all excited about decentralized trust graph and verifiable trust communities, but it's a little bit like I was thinking about it this morning. It's a little bit like back in the days of Tim Berners-Lee walking into some academic office going, "Hey, we can have a website," and people are like, "What?" Right? So there's a lot of education to go on here. All right, very good. Let me pop back to share my screen again, and we're good. I think we still are going to get time back there. Okay. And Jeff, yeah, please do put the a link in the chat to that doc. I think you already did. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. All right. If there are no other questions about that, we'll quickly go to agent names. And I've got a link here. Actually, I've got a and Carly's always anything want to cover. Carly, I'm working up a whole set of DTG thoughts about DTG bite-sized trust videos, but I don't want to overwhelm you. So let's let it settle down a little bit, and then we can work out that one. This is agent names doc. I'm going to put a link here. There we go. So this next one that I will share is in fact, I'll just go over the doc. It's easier to explain it there. The whole emergence of this, and Marcus, you're here with us tonight. I think I saw you on there, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Good, excellent. Okay. Because I want folks to have an understanding that this is not a brand new thought as this is the fact, and I'm just going to go down to the very first part of it here to explain that when we started work on DIDs, and this was in 2015, so wow, we're talking 11 years ago now. This Izuko's triangle. If you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend the Wikipedia page on Izuko's triangle. But it basically says for naming systems, it's a trilemma. You can get any two of these three, and DNS, for example, is human meaningful and it tries to be, at least it's federated. It's not fully decentralized, but it covers those two. Therefore, security has been a huge issue, and that's why we have many phishing and other kinds of attacks associated with URLs and email addresses. When we tackle DIDs, we said and it was Christopher Allen who really ensured we're going just after the bottom. We are, we're not going to, we're intentionally saying no human meaningful, right? Which is why I say to this day that DID web is the most dangerous DID method, and it's the crack cocaine of DID methods because it does say, hey, we can have human meaningful DIDs, and it is, yeah. So anyway, luckily we have now things like DID WebFs and DID WebVH that actually take the ease of use of hosting on a web server and make it secure and safe. But it means that is even less human meaningful. It basically pushes it back down to the side. So as long as that's been there, as useful as DIDs can be, they're not human meaningful at all. So the whole idea that's emerged over discussions, Marcus and I in particular had a whole history of combining what we call names and numbers back in the work we did on XRI and XDI. It's a fairly straightforward thing then to go, oh, well, what if you actually layer over a naming system? And that's what agent names are. They've had a couple names over the couple of years we've been discussing it, Marcus and I, a few others. But more recently, when in the DTG concept, when you said, oh, why do they call agent names? Well, because the idea is they resolve to a verifiable trust agent. And that's how we can make them. I'm very excited about this because I think how we can make them the most useful, privacy preserving, and empowering addresses that we've ever had. Compared to the two things we use most often today, an email address or a phone number, right? Certainly they can be a hell of a lot more privacy preserving. I'll put it that way. So what does an agent name look like? I'm going to stop here, and I actually want to stop and Marcus, have you give your perspective on, with all the time you've spent with DIDs, what are your thoughts about this, introducing this naming layer and this syntax?
Yeah, to me, I like it. Just like you, I think it's a good idea. There's, as you said, there have always been these approaches or initiatives to try to have human readable names. We have, in fact, in the past, in different working groups, also had specifications and proposals for, let's say, mapping domain names to DIDs or discovering DIDs from web addresses. So this is not so different from some previous approaches. One thing that I think is very important to point out that that the name, the agent name in this case, what we're looking at here, this is a way for discovering a DID, right? In my understanding, this is not the identifier that you would then see in other protocols and in steps after an initial discovery step, right? You would not see the agent name inside a verifiable credential. You would not see the agent name inside a DIDCOM message or any other protocol after that. So the way how I think about it is it's an initial discovery step. You resolve the agent name to a DID, but then from that point on, everything just happens the usual DID way, right? Then you can resolve a DID, and then you can do other things like DIDCOM or trust spanning protocol or verifiable credentials or OpenID or whatever.
Absolutely. It just the whole idea is it resolves to a DID the way a domain name would resolve to an IP address or whatever underlying, and that's what the protocol would then act on. Michael, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so you just kind of answered my question, but the follow-on then is, can these names be used for anything that a DID can refer to? For example, could I use it to name a purchase order?
Yes, is the short answer. It literally resolves to a DID, and because I'll point out in answering your question, and also the next key thing that this fact is just a whole bunch of questions that we've been working through to sort of work out the whole thing. the real sort of power of this particular syntax is it is URL. Uh, just as a string can be recognized in software that says, oh, is that a URL? Is that an email address? And then do smart things with it. This is really a layer of it will be recognized as URL by any software that recognizes URL. As you see, when I type these here, I didn't have to do anything. When I finish that, it just turns it into a URL. What now will happen is software. So if it's URL, you get what it resolves to, we just call the agent page, whatever it is, right? And so like Michael said, you could point it at anything. The idea is that software that says, oh, that's an agent name, it recognizes the /@ syntax. Now it knows it can request the did basically it requests it resolves the agent name and asks for the did, and then it resolves the did, and now it can talk to the agent, whatever that did might represent. Again, we call it agent names because the idea is if it is a person or organization or something on the decentralized trust graph, then it has a verifiable trust agent that you can talk to. And of course, we have the standardized set of protocols that we'll be defining for, forming a new relationship or making private introduction or whatever you do, right?
So just
yeah.
on my purchase order question, if I had /@ PO1234, that still has to go to an agent page. I can't get a did directly from that.
No. The idea is the software that would recognize an agent name would just request the did, right? It basically just says, okay, give me. It's a two-step thing. The agent name is a URL, but you ask for the corresponding did from the web server. Then you resolve the did. So all it is it's a redirect to a did.
So where does the agent page fit into this?
Oh, the agent page is the concept is if you have software that doesn't know that it's an agent name, then it's a URL, and the URL resolves to whatever you want to the agent page. And so we have it like, for instance, a question down here saying, well, how does a human know if it gets an agent page that they could use an agent name resolver, something that understands that? And it's like any agent page out there can say, by the way, like here's a QR code, or if you use a personal network manager, you can actually, talk to me if it was a personal agent name, right? Here's my agent page, but here's a QR code that you can actually use, and that would resolve inside a personal network manager or any software that understands decentralized trust graph. So we actually, it's down here. We talked about we introduced
so why aren't they just called did names?
That's a great question. Would there been a bunch of suggestions around naming it? By the way, it's this the name that started to get most interesting to us is the fact that if you have an agent at the other end, you can do a lot of smart things, and there's an industry educating the world that the future is all about AI agents. So it just came along,
But this is the same problem we had with the very first version of the did spec. People kept thinking about dids being people, and it took a while for people to educate them that dids could be for things. And we're going to run into exactly the same problem here, where these did names apply to things as equally as they apply to people and agents and companies and purchase orders.
That's a good point. Good point. Well, anyway, this is a suggestion that we are now formally bringing and submitting to the DTWG so we can start discussing it. Certainly, the need for these in a certain kind of. I will point out something. When you use an identifier like this, especially one you're going to use publicly, it applies to certain types of personas. It doesn't in any way address the need for personas that are, that we have a credential for, that are not intended to be, where we're going to control the correlation more closely. So in other words, it's useful when you want to have a human-friendly name for a persona, but it's not intended to, replace DIDs that are, designed to not be correlated.
Yeah,
So
but every business document on the planet needs a human readable name.
I agree with you, Michael, which is why this is, ever since we did DIDs, it's been in the background. Like, okay, what do we do about the human readable part of it? So yeah, good point. All right.
How do we, sorry, I'm going on, but how do we negotiate the name change?
We discuss it. Feel free to open literally, I wanted to do this, present it here. We'll start a GitHub discussion on that. In fact, we can start it just on the naming, and let's take that on there.
Thank
Is that
you.
good? Great. Christian, go ahead.
Hey, Drummond. Really quick, we face the same problem you're fixing here, or or proposing a solution. There's a difference between the agent and the assets, and how do we differentiate? It's all DIDs. We had that problem in our implementation of DIDs and VCs. The way we separated it is that the agent is the one with the keys, right? The one acting and issuing stuff, and the assets are usually controlled by an agent. So in our method, and that's the solution for everyone, but in our method, there's asset IDs and agent IDs, and the difference is that the agent has the keys published on its DID document that controls the signature on the asset document. So every asset document belongs to an agent document.
Bingo.
It's similar to what you're doing here. We had to implement something to face. And so in our social registry, only agent DIDs are can be named. That doesn't mean you wouldn't have a supply chain registry over there that would be more interested in naming asset DIDs perhaps. But anyway, that's how we resolved it in our implementation. Happy, I'll participate in our GitHub conversation.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
not far from where you're at, though.
I will. I want to leave time for Mitchell's demo, so I'll point out one more thing that was an inspiration for finally, pulling this forward and making part of it. When you have when you add the human readable layer, you actually solve a problem with digital signatures that has nothing to do with cryptography. It has to do with, well, whose signature is it, right? And an agent name that becomes, recognized or asserted by, for instance, an artist or a digital content creator, now can be used to sign a content credential in the Content Authenticity Initiative, and it becomes what they are calling in the COG working group an identity hook. Because you don't have to necessarily have credentials that you're also putting in the content credential manifest. The agent name itself, because it resolves to a DID, and the DID will, the agent name and the DID will go into the content credential. You can now refer to, that artists or reporters or content creators' ongoing identity and a personhood as they grow as an artist. So an agent name becomes literally like a signature of an artist on a painting or a byline of a reporter on an article, just because it's human readable and not just understood. We only have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to, Mitch, I assume you're going to share. I'll finish there.
Enable.
And again, what's that?
Thank you. I need sharing enabled. Okay, I'm all good. I'll do the whole screen. I do have one comment on this conversation that we've been having, and I've thought about this a lot around naming. I think if we're going to start here at the bottom edge, to assume that you can jump to the top of naming being the ultimate truth of what that thing is without having a journey is silly. I think there has to be a journey completed by an agent or a human for something to be named, and that journey needs to go through something of an experience, a reconstruction of meaning or value or whatever, of a receipt of someone paying for something. And then after that event, it may be named. And then that naming is actually the human meaningfulness onto the decentralized, which kind of like makes us map within the triangle. Anyway, I'm going to leave that thought there because we don't have much time and jump into this ceremony. So the context around this is governance conversation. We do a whole bunch of blockchain security stuff, cryptography, these sorts of complex topics, bring regulators into the room, cryptographers, multi-stakeholder. It's a really hard conversation most of the time. I co-chair it. It's fun. And it has informed a lot of what has been built here based on that experience. So the thing that I'm trying to build here is we could imagine the knowledge graph of the group, of the community, to be the substrate that we're working within. And that is controlled and managed by the majors. And the majors is just an AI which has access to an episodic knowledge system, which has different personas, and we'll experience that. Then there is the promise graph, and let's call this Swordsman DGG. This is just a ceremony, a key ceremony to go through the constraints of the swordsman, which has this cryptographic duality or the boundaries of my experience in this session. Privacy budget is interesting because it's about how much context window I'm allowing my information to go into the AI that we share. This is a my terms agreement. The assumption is this is a, wait, we have my terms maybe. I think I can assume everyone knows about my terms, hopefully. If not, it's an intent-based agreement layer where we do this like ceremony of bilateral agreement around tracking and information sharing. So we'll do that. I'll access all of the different AIs, create an agent card. This is interesting. It's kind of the agent naming thing. At the moment, I just do like some pretty standard key ceremony PGP cryptography stuff here. That's fine. But that's the swordsman side. Now let's talk to the mages. And they help us navigate the substrate of the event, which you could imagine to be kind of like a malt book experience, where I want to ask the identity key management and privacy mage about promises and proverbs. And this goes to a private inference, which is trained on the knowledge graph of Begin. So I've mapped all of the work that Begin's done, and we do a whole bunch of stuff about zero knowledge proofs and stuff. And anyway, that's in this answer. Now I'll cast that to the IKP spellbook, which is kind of like my agent sending that reconstruction of that meaning based on my question into the shared knowledge space of this event. And then if I want to add my own human meaning to that, I'll be like, promises, not impositions. Let's go. Inscribe that. And the flow would then be, let's ask the different, so the financial mage, promises and proverbs. And we get a different reconstruction, but within the same sort of environment, if you know what I mean. So the same substrate, but it's based on the financial documentation and knowledge base. So a whole bunch of stablecoin, a whole bunch of that stuff. And then I will cast that to the finance. But the same question, same reconstruction, and now I've formed it as a proverb. Wait, promises. I have 1 minute. Inscribe. So that creates a link between these two knowledge connections, which has been compressed into a proverb, which is my human meaningful commitment of that, which I could then make a promise to the group. And explain my research. And then flow that through. And if you could imagine this was actually my agent doing this on my behalf, then everyone else's agents would read that proverb and access the knowledge graph and reconstruct that meaning, which is here within the IKP spellbook. So it's also within the phase spellbook, and reconstruct that meaning because they have that constellation to track it by in the episodic knowledge. And then also maybe make a promise to commit to this research too. And then hopefully we get this spell web that forms, or this web of trust that forms. It's not a graph right now. I need help making this actually a graph, but it's 3 graphs overlaid where you have the knowledge that then overlays to the promises that the people could create in the community to actually build on this knowledge and build something between. And then that hopefully we can enshrine, as I said, with BTCs or VRCs, and the overlay or the unique proof of my private key and the path that I take through the knowledge graph becomes this proof of personhood, which hopefully is a proof of personhood that doesn't require like these more invasive biometric methods, because it's a unique path that I took through this journey of interaction with the shared substrate. I'm going to stop there. There's a lot there. I'm going to leave a video demo in the chat as well, of an experience that I shared through this with some classical music and Numb by Linkin Park made piano, which was a really fun discovery. But yeah, feel free to reach out and ask me about this. Join the conference. I'll also leave the Git that you can fork and use for your own governance. And I would like to do this for our own governance. Jump in, Michael.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead. Michael, were you going to say something? I know we're over time,
Yeah.
but
So I think the did names concept is really simple, and I contend that it can be described in 3 or 4 paragraphs in a draft did spec as an addendum to the draft did spec. The applications of did names, that can be different, and that's maybe what your larger spec is about. But the concept of did names as just being aliases, human understandable, human readable aliases for dids, that's simple. That could be part of the did spec.
yeah, if you want to go through the whole W3C process, I'm not disputing that.
You're going to go through a spec process anyway.
Yes, well, I mean that's part of what emergent.
So it's a question of where does it belong?
Yeah, okay. Since we're out of time, we can take that up. We can take that up on the thread that we'll start on GitHub. I know we're over time here. Thank you very much, Mitchell. And please feel free anything that you want to either add to the notes page for today or to start a GitHub thread about what you're doing so folks can explore it more.
Will do.
Thank you, everyone. Again, I'm hoping we can hold the call next week. It will be right before the second day of Linux Foundation Member Summit, but we'll still aim for it. If I'm not available, hopefully we can still meet. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. And thanks, everyone. On to your next call.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
You bet.